We just have a quorum, and this is the appointed time, so I call to order this meeting. This is the Public Works Subcommittee meeting. As at the last meeting, we completed the scrutiny of 3 items for the 2017-18 legislative year with a total allocation of $3.6953 billion. We'll continue with the 4 papers not yet completed on the meeting of the 1st of November 2017, involving a sum of $4.1407 billion. And I remind members that if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to items discussed at today's meeting, please disclose the nature of your interest before you speak according to Rule 83A of the ROP. May I also remind members on the voting requirements where direct pecuniary interests are involved under Rule 84 of the ROP. The first item is PWSC 2017-18-20 academic building at point number 3 Sassoon Road. Members are invited to recommend to the Finance Committee the upgrading of the 63 EG to Category A, an estimated cost of $810.9 billion for the construction of a new academic building for the University of Hong Kong. Members of the Education Panel discussed the relevant item with support from members to forward this item to the PWSC for consideration. We have from the Administration representative of the Hong Kong U, Dr. Christine Choi, Under Secretary for Education, Ms. Sharon Koh, Principal Assistant Secretary for Education, Ms. Winnie Wong, Deputy Secretary General, University Grants Committee Secretariat, Mr. Alan Sin, Chief Technical Advisor of the ASD, Dr. Stephen Cannon, Executive Vice President of the Hong Kong U, and Professor Chen Ying-sing, Associate Dean of the Lee Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine at Hong Kong U, Mr. Tam King Leung, Director of Estates Hong Kong U, and Mr. Bernard Lim, Principal of the Architecture, Design and Research Group Limited. Would members who wish to ask questions please press the button first? Dr. K.K. Kwok. First round, 4 minutes. Chairman, for this new academic building, we're going to support it, but I do have a number of questions. First, on its title. I understand that this new academic building will be using the same title, Lee Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine. And a while ago, according to a media report, it was said that Lee Ka-shing did not pay the donation in full, and the dean openly appealed to him to pay up. And first of all, it is such a disappointment. And second, this building will still carry the title Lee Ka-shing. I want to know whether he has made any donation to this new academic building at all. If not, it is really perplexing why we're still using the title Lee Ka-shing. Now, about this new academic building for the Faculty of Medicine, I support that because I'm also a graduate. But back then, many alumni found it regrettable that the title Lee Ka-shing was used. Well, it was said that the donation amounted to $1 billion, and it was kind of sold off to the tycoon Lee Ka-shing. I don't know whether he has paid up or not. I'd like the Hong Kong U to explain that. And if somebody tries to get any honor from out of this without paying the donation in full, I think that it should carry the title of just an academic building instead of using Lee Ka-shing's name, to our dismay. Under Secretary, I think about naming of the building, I should defer to the representative of Hong Kong U. Well, Chairman, I'd like to take this question. I am Professor Chen Ying-sing. Yes, please. To my knowledge, Mr. Lee Ka-shing took part in the naming of the building 12 years ago, and I understand that the payment has been made in full to the university. I'd just like to respond to a member's question. But it seems that the payment wasn't made until much later. Do you have information? There are several versions. Well, that's my time, Chairman. Allow me to continue with the question. First of all, the payment was made in installments, and it wasn't made until repeated urging from the university. I don't want to set a bad precedent because it is such an embarrassment, and he is trying to get advantage out of it. Professor Chan. I do not have information at hand, but I understand that the payment has been made in full to the University of Hong Kong. Professor, perhaps after the meeting you can give us more information, because this is about public money. I feel that we should be concerned. Right, please provide a written response afterwards. Next, about the Patrick Manson building. It is a historic building. I want to know whether this will be taken down or whether it will be kept for development. We do not have any plan to take down Patrick Manson building. We're going to keep it. Well, but it is said that there are some thing that will expire soon. We have the faculty using the premises, and after the new academic building is completed, the relevant faculties will be reprovisioned to the new building. Whereas for the Patrick Manson building, I'd like to tell members that we have no plan to demolish it. It will be kept. Mr. Yu Siwing, 4 minutes. Now about Block K of the Sassoon Road of the Queen Mary Hospital and also the Sassoon Road. There are 2 sites involved. Well, I want to compare these 2 sites. Are they of a similar size? Also, after completion of the new building, I want to know whether additional expenditure will be incurred, and if so, who is going to pay for it? Mr. Tam, would you like to take this question?
First of all, in building this building at number 3, Sassoon Road, it's not just about providing support to the Hong Kong U and also the QMH, but then we also are short of teaching facilities. That's why, after discussing that with the Education Bureau, the Hong Kong U is still very much short of teaching facilities. That's why, other than redeveloping the building and also resuming some teaching facilities, we are also making up for the shortfall that we are lacking. As to the sizes of the 2 sites, well, the current 3 sites are actually bigger than the site at QMH. But of course, as I said, for the additional facilities, actually, they will be used for making up for the shortfall that we are having in terms of teaching facilities. And other than this block, actually, we're still short of a lot of teaching facilities, and the medical faculty is also trying to raise funds in order to have additional facilities at their own venue in order to make up for the shortfall in teaching facilities. Well, after the completion and commissioning with the 2 blocks, will there be any need for the interfacing and handover, and how much cost will be incurred? Well, according to our plan, the old block will be handed over to the HA, and HA will be responsible, and all the facilities within this block will be handed over to the Hong Kong U, and they will be up to the university to decide. So the cost has already been covered by the cost estimate for the project. And also for number 3, Sassoon Road, with regard to the plot ratio and also the superstructure, are you able to optimize or maximize the plot ratio, or is there still a spare plot ratio that has not been used? Well, under the buildings ordinance, well, we can build up to 10 times in terms of the plot ratio. but then planning department has already relaxed it, and we have built up to 5 because there are other restrictions in terms of building height, and also the boundary of the site is also restricted, and therefore 5 is already the maximum that we can do. So we have already done our best. So you have already made an assessment, and there is no further room for expansion. No, unless you relax the building height restriction. But then in this particular area, it's not permitted. All right. Okay. Other than plot ratio, there are also building height restrictions. Yes, Mr. Raymond Chen, 4 minutes. Yes, I'd like to follow up on greening, because at the education panel, some members were also concerned about this. And looking at this particular project, well, if you look at the layout plan, there would be some greening. So some members asked whether or not there are criteria for landscaping and greening. So is it that for this particular project, we have already got quite a large scale of greening, and also what's the cost for that? And also when it comes to greening and landscaping, well, what came to mind was the collapse of the rooftop at CTU last year, and it was quite fortunate that there was no casualty or injuries. But then subsequently we were told that it had to do with the landscaping on the rooftop, and because of the design, well, it was thicker than originally designed, and subsequently because of the stagnant water and so on, the rooftop collapsed, and apparently nobody was held responsible. So while we are doing this project, let's take up the opportunity to discuss it. So how can we ensure that the tragedy at CTU will not be reported? You talk about the criteria and also the specifications, but then when it comes to actual implementation, you can just decide not to follow. So what is going to happen for this one? Can you tell us more? Yes, Professor Lam. Thank you, members, for your questions. Well, actually, the government does have some guidelines on greening, and for this particular plot, we're talking about 2%, and in our design, we have already achieved the 20% ratio. On top of that, at the external wall and also on rooftop, there will be further greening and landscaping. And when such designs are already incorporated in the design at the design stage, then our structural engineer has already prepared for the support, and also there will also be proper drainage and so on. So there would not be similar structural problems at that with the CTU. Any further follow-up? Yes, at the panel meeting, there was also a report saying that members was glad to hear that there would be gender-friendly facilities and so on. So when I look at the design plan, apparently they would only have barrier-free toilets and so on. So what about gender-friendly facilities? What are they? Because for accessible toilet or universally accessible toilets, well, those would be for the able-bodied and handicapped persons. But then for gender-friendly facilities, those are an entirely different story. So does that mean that you have already incorporated those facilities, or would the barrier-free access toilets be accommodating both genders? Well, we have already designed for gender-friendly facilities. That's why on every floor we have already accommodated that, and we have some 40 such rooms. And last time we already gave a briefing to the education panel meeting. All right. Para 6 of the paper says that in 2016-17 there's a shortfall of 42,800 square meters in terms of NOVA, but then on this occasion you're going to provide some 14,000 square meters in terms of NOVA. So what else would you be doing in order to make up for the shortfall? In fact, Mr. Tam already explained part of that. So Mr. Tam, over to you. Well, in our negotiation with the administration, in our submission to the government, at the university, at the main campus, we have a science and engineering hub. In simple terms, that's a department for science and technology, and there will be 3 buildings on that campus, and 2 of them have already been processed by the administration, and 1 has completed design, that's B-, and the other one would be we would be getting the green light for going ahead with the design. And then for the remaining one, we are still thinking about whether or not we can raise funds to do that ourselves. So that those are the teaching facilities that we will be building in the near term. Yes, I'm speaking in support of this project, but then there are some concerns. In terms of the design of the building, I think the university must have heard the views from the stakeholders in the district. One of the concerns would be about the people flow, including those from the QMH and also people that will be using the bus stop, and also with the new teaching block. Will you be attracting more people from outside the district and from within the district, and have you factored that in? And also, in terms of people flow, have you got any plans to make sure that there would not be problems? And also, have you catered for people staying over for a short while there? So, will you be able to ensure that the block will still be publicly accessible, so that other people would also be able to have access there? And also about the estimate, well, you're getting $800 million, but then, of course, according to my understanding, the project would need much more than that. So for the overall estimate and also the funding arrangement, can you tell us a bit more? Yes, Mr. Tam. Yes, I'll first talk about the traffic arrangement, because this block is at the junction of Pak Fu Lam Road and Sassoon Road, and as you might be concerned about the traffic implications. Well, first on the location and also on traffic arrangements, the original site. Well, originally there were two entrances to the building, but then we have already changed that to one in order to improve the traffic safety at the locality, because it's very close to Pak Fu Lam Road. So when vehicles turn the bend, it might be kind of dangerous. That's why we have reduced the number of entrances to one in order to enhance safety. And also the block is there for the use by the teaching staff and the students, and therefore the same group of people will be using that block. But then through footbridges from Hill Road and also Pak Fu Lam Road, they will be directly connected to other blocks on campus, so that the people would be diverted from the at-grade traffic to the footbridges, because sometimes patients and their family members will also be coming down from the QMH to the block for further follow-up consultations and so on. And also, there would also be one additional access from QMH instead of using the road at grade. And also, we have also talked to some district councillors. We have had meetings with them, and in the development process, we hope that we'd be able to take the opportunity to improve the bus stop at Pak Fu Lam Road, because at rush hours they would be that would be rather crowded because of the narrow space there. So we'll be taking the opportunity to widen the access near the bus stop in order to improve public access. In fact, for this particular project, in terms of the cost, in principle, the administration is to fund the entire project. But then, because we have special needs and also special requirements, and the district council has also imposed on us certain requirements, and those might not be readily covered by the original estimate. That's why the Hong Kong U will also be raising funds in order to deal with those needs. So as to how much we'll be spending, well, we have not finalized the estimate, but then that would be between $50 million to $100 million. So we'll be following that direction. Thank you. Any further follow-up? Next, Fernando Cheung, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Of course, we support the project, but then from what I've heard from the university in answering the questions raised by Dr. Kwok in terms of the naming, I haven't heard the reply very clearly. Apparently, if the building's construction is fully funded by the administration, then in terms of the naming of the building, how come we can have it named after an individual, because it's funded fully by taxpayers? So how come it's going to be named after an individual? So I don't think that's reasonable, right? So what has happened? Why do we have to name it after an individual? Who is to answer that? Professor Chen. Thank you. I think it's a very good question raised by Dr. Fernando Cheung. At this stage, no arrangements have been made for this block to be named after any individual. At this juncture, there's no such plan because the entire medical faculty is called Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine. That's why supposedly it's a funding request by the Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine, but then it doesn't mean that the block will also be named after Mr. Li Ka-shing, and we haven't got plans to do it either. In other words, there will be no nameplate saying that it's going to be named Li Ka-shing Medicine Block. No, in the current design, there's no such plan, so we only have the logo of the University of Hong Kong. Okay, I'm also concerned about people flow because I noticed that the project will be connected to the footbridge to QMH, and of course that's reasonable. But what I'm concerned about is will the footbridge have to be closed during the works period? Yes? Who can answer that question? Mr. Bernard Lim. Yes, thank you for the question. In fact, on this particular design, we have already taken it up with the Highways Department and the relevant committee under the Highways Department. We have been maintaining close liaison with them while we are submitting our plans because the location of the block is at the end of the existing footbridge. And therefore, I believe that in the works period, we don't have to close the existing footbridge, but then to a certain extent, we may have to hold it up in order to safeguard the safety of those involved. But what about the vertical lift? Because for those who have mobility problems when they try to cross the roads to the QMH, basically that's the only access for them. So I'd like to know whether or not the lift will not be affected. No, it will not be affected. That's very important. And also, I'd like to further clarify this because from what I've heard from Mr. Raymond Chen about the toilet facilities, well, for many wheelchair-bound, they are concerned that, well, for the accessible toilet, if there's to be one additional label saying that it's gender neutral, then by the time when they are commissioned, they might find it embarrassing if they have to use the toilet. So we should not be converting barrier-free toilets to gender-neutral toilets, right? No, that's not the case. Because if you look at the layout plan for the barrier-free toilets, well, there would be independent toilets for the physically handicapped, and we are going to have independent toilets with their own sinks and so on. So in the early planning stage, we've already factored that in.
Next, Dr. Kwok-Kaki, 3 minutes, second round. Chairman, I'd like to ask about the construction price. In 2016, at that time, Dr. Gabriel Leung said that he would be asking for funding of 500 million. So I reckon that he was referring to this academic facility. Now the estimated cost is $800 million. In just 2 years' time, the cost has surged so substantially. I'd like to ask why. Professor Chen just now also asked raised another point. He said very clearly that in the future, the title of the new building won't carry Li Ka-shing, this name, right? Who would take the question on the point of cost, Mr. Tam? $500 million? Perhaps that was just a very preliminary ballpark figure. At that time, the plot ratio was estimated to be 3.5. Now it's 5, so it's different. Second, the estimated cost is also related to the tender price index. It is adjusted according to the index as a matter of practice. And last time at the panel on education, we also explained that the cost is on the low side. In fact, for this time, the cost so reported is lower than the previous report. Professor Chen, would you also take the question on the title of the building? Let me tell Dr. Kwok and other members that we have no plan to use the 3 words Li Ka-shing on the naming of the new building. Just now, from the Hong Kong U representative, I understand that the estimated cost has been prepared in such a way, and I understand that the government also has a mechanism on monitoring the use of resources. I want to know whether the mechanism applies to this project and whether the estimated cost has been assessed by the mechanism to see whether it's value for money. Mr. Tam, or rather it's a question for the government. Or perhaps Mr. Hon can take the question. I think Dr. Kwok is referring to the Cost Control Office under the Development Bureau. The office started its operation 2 years ago for major projects. Indeed, we looked at the estimated costs to see whether the estimates are accurate, and we did the same for this project. All right, so another question. In the process, has the government advised the Hong Kong University how or if the estimated cost can be made more reasonable? We looked at the preliminary design to see if it is reasonable. And Dr. Kwok, please understand that we do not have abundant manpower available to look at the details of each and every project. We do, however, check the estimated cost in the design and see if they are reasonable. Next, Mr. Ted Hui, 3 minutes. I asked about traffic and the financial aspects of the project. I understand in paragraph 33 that some trees will be felled, including T43 and T41, which are OVT, old and valuable trees. Now, in the annex, it is said that they are recommended to be felled. And then there is something about giving consideration and another detailed study. I think that is quite vague. Can you tell us, are you recommending these trees to be felled, or will a study be conducted first? What is the sequence of events? In the past, for cases that I came across in the redevelopment project or new development projects, ultimately the trees would be felled without any condition imposed on transplanting or compensatory planting. The old valuable trees, after they're felled, they'll be gone. Can you explain, Mr. Lim? For the Hong Kong U team and our team, we share the same goal. We'd like to keep as many trees as possible. For the trees you mentioned, they are grown on the walls involved, and we need to conduct a detailed assessment for the on-site team to check the distribution of roots of the trees. And that is why before we complete the land exchange, we're unable to gain access for a detailed study. But after conducting a detailed study, and after assessments made by our professionals and landscape architects, we will try to preserve as many trees as possible. So I'm afraid at this point in time in the paper, we are unable to give this guarantee that these trees will remain. We can only give the undertaking that after the land exchange has taken place, we will conduct a professional assessment. I have a follow-up question. Now, you talk about land exchange, which has yet to be completed. But why is it that you have said so in enclosure 4? Can you just take back these words, recommendation? For the time being, we will conduct the professional assessments necessary first. So we have prepared the plan together with the administration team, and the plan involves transplanting or new trees being planted, and that is based on the plan that in the event that these trees are to be felled, we will provide new plants, but we will conduct the professional assessments later. Then, Chairman, I don't think that this is being honest. Well, in fact, for the 2 ficus microcarpa mentioned in enclosure 7, we have the preliminary assessment showing that the form and or health condition of the 2 trees isn't very good. It's poor, in fact. But according to their reply, they need to verify the conditions first, and they have made their stance clear. They will try to keep as many trees as possible. Next, Dr. Fernando Zhang, second round, 3 minutes. Well, I, of course, wouldn't like to see old and valuable trees being felled. And I agree with Mr. Ted Hui that the description in the paper seems very vague. It seems that you may go ahead with felling the trees. You just try to preserve the trees if possible. I don't think this is proactive enough. You should not declare a death sentence on the 2 trees at this stage. Although there is little chance that these trees will be kept, you should not just decide that they should be felled there and then. Another point, I understand on the 2nd floor there will be a footbridge leading to the other building, and then there are other facilities which will be used by the public, including a clinic for the teaching hospital. And I understand that for the Chinese and Western medicine clinic, they would also be placed there. These are good because these will be available for the public's use. I am concerned about the kiosk and the open space. I understand that this will be barrier-free facilities. Now, my question is this. Would you consider allowing social enterprises to run the refreshment kiosk so that public resources can be used to help the underprivileged? Who would take the question? Mr. Tam? Responding to your first question on trees, it's not just about the public's expectation on the university. Even within the university, our architects and our landscape architects face huge pressure. We adopt the highest standards. Any tree that may be felled will be subject to the harshest criticism. So that is why we do consider this point very stringently. And allowing social enterprises to operate in the university isn't something new. We have some successful cases and some cases not so successful. So we do have a practice for social enterprises to operate in the university, and there is a mechanism for granting bids. Now, I think that the public will be clear. I'm not asking which social enterprise should take it up. I'm asking if, because the facilities will be used by the public, it will be there is a footbridge connecting to the building. You are going to bring people in to the teaching hospital clinic, and this is quite a good location. I just hope that you will seriously consider allowing a social enterprise to run the refreshment kiosk. I think Mr. Tam has already made their position clear. Right. We've heard Mr. or Dr. Zhang's suggestion. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, first round, 4 minutes. Just now, a member asked about land exchange and the treatment of trees. I want to know whether there is a timetable for land exchange. When will it be completed? And whether this arrangement would affect the commencement date of the construction contract. And in the event that there is a delay for the land exchange, will there be additional costs? Mr. Tam, as I understand, the Lands Department has prepared the draft of the land exchange agreement. We have had meetings. We have preliminary agreed to the contract. For the commencement of the project, it all, of course, hinges on approval from the Legislative Council. Now, there are obstacles because, for example, at this stage we do not have this site available, and there are uncertainties yet to be verified. For trees, for example, we have included these matters in the agreement. The contractor will be required to deal with these matters when they have access to the site. We believe that this could be factored in our estimates. The greatest hazard, in fact, is that the longer the delay, the higher the risk that the tender may be nullified. So if we could start the tendering process as soon as possible, these problems will be resolved. Well, Chairman, all members who have spoken today, in fact, support the commencement of the project. Nobody here wants to delay the project. But, you know, it's usually a chain of events leading to cost overrun. I just want to make sure this won't happen. According to the university, if you already have a very clear indication of what is going to happen, perhaps even before approval has been given by the Legislative Council, you can give us papers with more details so as to allay our concerns. Yes, definitely. Second point. I understand that the new building will entail a lot of office space, and there will be 26 parking spaces. If there are so many offices housed in the building, I want to know how you come by the number of parking spaces to be built, because in the university it seems that you're always short of parking spaces for either teaching staff, for students. Well, of course, students should use public transport. But are you going to encourage even teaching staff to use public transport as well? Mr. Lim? The university attaches great importance to the issue of transport. So teaching staff as well as students are encouraged to use public transport. As for the land lease, it comes with a condition restricting the number of parking spaces. We find this reasonable because we don't want to impose a burden on the road network around Sassoon Road. So parking spaces will only be provided on a need basis. We don't want to build another floor of basement. It will be very expensive. We believe that this number of parking spaces is optimal. Dr. K.K. Kwok, 2 minutes, third round. Chairman, still on trees. Some trees were there 37 years ago. And just now, Mr. Tam made some remarks. I don't understand why university now speaks like the government. They're very vague about preserving trees. Has it to do with how soon we approve the funding application? Please don't say something like that. If you think that from the university's perspective you like to preserve trees, then that's also our perspective. Don't say at the outset that we're trying to delay the funding. Please take it back.
I understand that the university has experts, for example, Professor Chim Chi-yong. Well, very often we would seek his advice on many other issues. So you do have experts. So at the FC, will you be able to provide us with more detailed assessments? And if at all possible, can we ask Professor Chim to attend the FC meeting in order to tell us exactly how you're going to preserve these trees, and also for the 2 trees at Sassoon Road. For those of us who are familiar with the location, will know those trees very well, because we don't want to have different views about the trees from the university. But from what you said, I find those remarks rather objectionable. Well, I've no intention whatsoever to pass the buck on to lawmakers, but then what I was trying to say was that if we were not able to do the land exchange, we might not be able to enter the site to conduct very detailed assessment, and that would be subject to the funding approval by this council. So I just stated the facts. I had no intention whatsoever to blame anybody. So if I made certain remarks which were offensive to anybody, I can only apologize for that. I was just stating the facts. It's about the procedures. Without the approval from this council, the Lands Department would not be doing the land exchange, and then we would not be able to enter the site to do the detailed assessment. Okay, Mr. Tam, on the trees conservation, we can also take it up with the Lands Department so that before the completion of all the procedures, you should be allowed to enter the site, and you might as well ask Professor Chim to come along, and then you can also provide us with a report before the FC meeting. That would be more pragmatic. Or else if we just ask Professor Chim to explain things to us at the FC meeting, that might be rather cumbersome. So I hope that government departments can also be more understanding, so that before the completion of all the procedures, they should be prepared to allow you in. Because if you look at the two trees, I understand that you have some initial information about those two Ficus microcarpa. So if you can follow up on those trees right after this meeting, it would be nice. Yes, we do share similar views. It's just because that the trees are located behind the walls, and we will have to follow the existing standard procedures in carrying out the works. Yes, I think the views are understood, but then it's about the land exchange procedures, and because of that you're not able to do the detailed assessment. I suggest that you should take it up with the government departments concerned, because we do have the Undersecretary and all the other officials here, so I'm sure they will be able to help instead of waiting until the FC meeting to engage in further arguments. I think that would not be necessary. Okay, next, Eddie Chu, asking for the first time, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I can see that you've already spent about $10 million on energy conservation, greening, and also recyclable installations and so on. And you also have some facilities for energy efficiency, and that's in para 29. And also you'll be able to save up to 9.4% energy consumption, and that would also mean that the facilities will be more durable in terms of 9.6 years. And also for the photo voltage facilities and so on. Well, for the cost recovery period, generally speaking, you're actually talking about a 30-year period, but then apparently you're suggesting that 9.6 years would also be satisfactory. So what's the situation with regard to the payback period? And also for the slope and also trees, I'd like to follow up on that too. Because what we are particularly concerned is that if it's on a slope, because behind it you have a hill, and for this particular item, right behind it we have the jockey club facility. So I'm sure when you did that, you've already factored in on the drainage facilities to ensure that the safety factor will be enhanced. So what I'd like to know is, for this particular block, well, is apparently on a relatively small site, and behind it we have the Hong Kong Jockey Club building for interdisciplinary research. So can some government departments tell us, in this particular case, concerning tree conservation, we should be working towards that instead of applying the across-the-board standards? Who can answer this question? Professor Lim? Well, just now some lawmakers asked about the renewable energy, about the solar power. Well, I don't have the information with me. I am afraid I can only provide the information after the meeting. Well, with regard to the multidisciplinary research center for the Jockey Club, in fact, the facility is under the HA. That's why we haven't yet entered the site to conduct site investigation and so on. But then the only thing that we can say is that on this particular project, as far as this project is concerned, the CEDD has requested that some slope stabilization works be carried out, and will be prepared to do it. But then in relation to the earlier project, there is no specific connection or link between the two projects. But then will the administration be able to answer this? Because for cases like that, right next to it, a new block will be put up. And also, in terms of the surrounding slope and also drainage, will you be able to ensure safety? And also for the remaining part of it, you don't want to see a situation whereby because of the small part, right next to it, there is already drainage, so that where there is torrential downpour, it will still be able to cope. So what kind of additional pressure would it be subjected to? Because right next to it, we have already got trees on the wall and so on, and the trees should be able to hang on to the walls, right? So can you adopt a different approach to ensure that the trees can be kept intact? So I'd like to know if the administration would like to respond to that. Yes? From the Architectural Services Department, can we have some response, please? Yes, Chairman. Well, for the related issue, it has to do with slope safety or stability. So it's not under the remit of the Architectural Services Department. All right, who can answer the question? Yes, Mr. Tem Chi Kung. Chairman, I cannot say in general terms that the trees can hang on to the slope very safely, because every site is unique. It depends on the gradient of the slope and so on. So it cannot be generalized. But then the general view is whether or not the trees will be able to hang on to the slopes very securely. Well, we cannot expect the trees to help stabilize the slope per se. So we'll have to leave that to the CEDD and also the works proponent, so that they can conduct joint site investigation to see if a particular tree can be kept or does it have to be felled. Well, just one additional comment, Chairman, because at present on both sides of the site there are already buildings, and if you think that they are dangerous, then why have you not felled them earlier? Well, in reality, on many slopes, they have to carry out stabilization works. So for individual cases, as to a specific slope, whether or not the trees on those slopes can be kept, I think it depends. So they've already pledged that they're going to conduct site investigations as soon as possible, so that the professors and also the experts will be going in to conduct detailed investigation, and then they'll supply us with supplementary information paper later. Next, Fernando Zhang, asking for the third time, 2 minutes. Well, those of us who have spoken in support of the project, but then we do have some concerns, for example, on tree preservation, on accessible access, and also people flow and so on. I think for the time being, these are very reasonable and mainstream questions. So I hope that the administration needs not worry about it. Please do not be agitated. Please do not think that we are filibustering or we are dragging our feet. No, that's not true. And by making such comments is not satisfactory either. And also on tree conservation, I'd like to ask Mr. Han, the permanent secretary, is it that because you have not been able to carry out the land exchange, that's why the architects and also the university staff have not been able to enter the site to conduct very detailed site investigation and assessment? Is that right, Mr. Han? I do not have the information with me, Chairman. I think I'll have to check it up with the Development Bureau. But then, do you allow or permit university staff to enter the site, because they have been claiming that they have not been able to enter the site? So what's your response? Is there any room for them to enter the site so that they can conduct the detailed assessment in a timely manner without delaying the project at all? Well, Chairman, I can only promise that I'll take it up with the relevant departments after the meeting. Well, by inference, I don't think it's cast in stone. I don't think is a very strict jacket thing. I'm sure you'll be able to take it up with the relevant departments. And Mr. Tam has never said that this subcommittee or this council are trying to delay the project. He's just referring to the obstacles or problems in relation to land exchange. So I've heard him say that. So I'd like to clarify that on his behalf. So please do not misunderstand him. Next, Wu Chi-wei asking for the second time, 3 minutes. So I think is carried out in a rush, because in March 2017 they've already done the project tendering work. So can the permanent secretary help answer this question? Because from paragraph 5 it says that okay, you need the funding from this council, and then in the first quarter of 2018 construction works will commence. So I'd like to know a bit more about this with regard to the timeline after the PWSC meeting. Of course, they will have to go to the FC. So will they be able to get an earlier schedule? Or else, if they are not able to start works in the first quarter next year, that might also affect the progress of the project. Would that be the case? Yes, Mr. Lam. Please turn on the microphone for Mr. Raislin Lau, Deputy Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Yes? No problem. The mic is not on. The mic is not working. So can we turn on the microphone for Mr. Lau, Mr. Raislin Lau, DS for the FSTB. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. So long as the PWSC approves this funding request, we'll try to table it before the FC as soon as possible according to the current schedule. Some 2 projects have been approved by the FC, so we'll try to do that as soon as possible. So this will be the 3rd one in the queue. So you'll be able to go to the FC in the near term without affecting the start date for the project, right? So after the approval is given, we'll deal with that at the FC as soon as possible. Last but not least, I'd like to confirm this, alright, by the time when we have the next FC meeting, with regard to the slope stabilization works which have been raised by some other members, will there be a supplementary information paper to set out the details so that when we discuss that at the FC meeting, we don't have to ask again at the FC about these issues? So can you confirm that? I think you're clear about members' questions, right? Alright, is that feasible? I can see that Mr. Tam and Professor Lim were nodding their heads. Okay? In other words, at the next meeting, number 1 on land exchange details, and also on tree conservation and assessment, you will also be able to provide us with further details instead of just making suggestions and so on. So, have I understood it correctly, Mr. Tam? In fact, members' questions will help us. Well, there are many obstacles, and you've actually helped us. All right, Mr. Tam has been very positive. Whatever has been said today will also help him in dealing with such.
So I hope that what we do today can help with your arrangement. Mr. Jeremy Tam, 4 minutes, first round. Chairman, about this new academic building, the additional space created would come under the Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine. I want to know how many more students you can take up. After the new building is completed, will there be more places for the Faculty of Medicine? If so, by how many? And there will also be a clinic for teaching. I want to know whether it will be open for the public as an outpatient clinic, and again, how many quotas available, please. Professor Chan, please. Thank you, Chairman. First question about more space, more places. I'd like to explain this to members. In the past few years, The management committee of the Hong Kong U has been urging the Faculty of Medicine to increase the number of places for the Faculty of Medicine and also for the number of places in general. About the facilities concerned, at the moment we do not have enough seats for students. So in the previous summer breaks, we actually took down some seats and replaced them with new ones, so that for the 235 medical students and 100 plus nursing students, they can attend classes together. We redesigned the lecture theaters so that we now can accommodate all the students. And we also have 2 lecture halls. Well, can he just answer my question, Chairman? How many more places? How many places will be available for students? About new places, we have increased the places in the past, but we do not have the relevant supporting facilities, for example, in the form of more seats in the lecture theaters. So now the new academic building will allow us to build a lecture theater that could accommodate all the students. Second question about the clinic for the Chinese medicine. We at the number 20 or Sassoon Road, we have clinic. It's quite far from Pok Fu Lam, so by public transport, even if patients use public transport, they need to climb a very steep slope. And after completing the new academic building, it will be reprovisioned so that it will be more convenient for patients. So in other words, it's for the public, right? Mr. Jeremy Tam, my question is this. On the second floor, I see you have a number of clinics, Western, Chinese medicine, all included, and they will be reprovisioned, right? At the moment, how many are there? And after they are reprovisioned, how many more are we talking about? Is there any addition of clinics? And how many more patients can you receive on a daily basis? For the Chinese teaching clinic, it's currently housed in a rather aged building. That's not my question. He asked whether you can take up more patients every day. I don't have information at hand, but I believe that for the new academic buildings, teaching clinic, it can receive more patients. All right, the professor hasn't the information at hand. Please give us a reply in writing later. Next, Mr. Horace Zhang, for first time, 4 minutes. At the education panel on the 15th of May, we discussed this item. And I understand that there was a question on the toilet. We have the normal ones, toilets for gents, ladies, and then I read this. There would be some gender-friendly washroom facilities on every floor, totaling 41 of them. So, I read from the paper that there are so many toilets. So altogether, how many toilets on each floor? And what's the idea behind having gender-friendly toilet on each floor of the building? Has the university conducted any survey and find that it is necessary to do so? Can you explain the background? Who would take the question? Mr. Lim. If members could refer to the pictures and enclosures, you can see that we have toilets for gents, for ladies, and you can see that these toilets come with cubicles. And then on every floor, there is also a barrier-free toilet for the disabled, along with 4 other toilets with basins included inside, and these are gender-friendly toilets. So altogether, this is the arrangement we have, as far as the number of toilets are concerned, apart from meeting all the requirements under the building regulations, we have altogether 41 such gender-friendly toilets. Right, I also read that in the paper, 41 of them. But this is the first building in Hong Kong where we have gender-friendly facility on every floor of the building. I'd like to know how you come by this idea. Is it really necessary? Because it's unprecedented. Professor. Yes, Dr. Cannon?
The university is committed to equal opportunities in its widest sense, and the provision of a whole series of facilities meets that requirement. This is the first opportunity we've had to do that in a building, and we're taking that opportunity. It meets that underlying commitment to equality of opportunity, to a gender barrier-free environment, and we're taking that opportunity to do that.
Yes, Mr. Horace Chang. But this is not the requirement under the existing policy or the existing laws. Does it mean that in the future, whenever there is a new building to be constructed within the university, you are going to do the same? Or is it just a one-off requirement? Will it be a future consideration for all buildings? Apart from this university, I mean, it's the student union is also requesting that some toilets be converted into gender-friendly facilities. So after this new academic building is completed, we need to wait for the feedback of the facilities from users as to whether in the future other new buildings will be provided with gender-friendly facilities. We believe so, but as for the number, it depends on the students' response. Dr. Cheng Shung Tai, first round, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I noticed in the paper that the expansion comes as a result of the increase in number of places for students and number of teachers of the Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine. And from the news, we understand that the number would go beyond 3,000. So before and after expansion, do you have any idea whether there will be any improvement on the space per capita in the campus? In the media reports, it is said that because of shortage of dormitories, some students might need to stay overnight in some laboratories. And I also heard from some students in the Hong Kong universities that they needed to stay overnight in some of the rooms in the campus. So you have more teaching space after the building is completed. What about space available to students? Will there be any improvement with the arrival of the new building? That's the first question. Second, estimated cost. It seems that the estimated cost is now higher, from 500 to 800 or even $900 million. So please explain why by the time you submit this paper to the Finance Committee, the cost will be increased to some $800 million. Another point, it's quite close to the Queen Mary Hospital, just opposite. I want to know whether there will be other facilities or measures to avoid affecting the operation of the QMH. For one of the questions, it has been answered in detail. So perhaps we can focus on questions 1 and 3. Any improvement on space for students? Perhaps the professor can supplement. Now, at the moment, it is not really desirable. In the Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine, people are very, it's so cramped that some students are forced to sit on the floor. And we recently took down some of the seats, and students were required to sit on steps during lectures. A second point, we have some teaching labs for nursing students and medical students to have clinical practice, and we do not have a sufficient number of beds. Students staying overnight in the teaching rooms, this happens if they work too late, but we don't encourage them. We encourage them to go back to their own dormitories, and that is why we also have demands to meet. On the whole, we don't encourage them to stay overnight, but for research students, sometimes they work really till late at night, and they do stay overnight. Point number 3, will surrounding facilities be affected? Mr. Lim. As far as this site is concerned, we're going to restrict the access of vehicles to the site during construction period, so as not to affect Pak Fu Lam Road. Is situated at the low end of Sassoon Road, and we will require the contractor to provide a transport and traffic assessment plan before they commence the project. It should not pose any impact on the operation of QMH. Mr. Jeremy Tam, second round, 3 minutes. I'm not happy with the answer they gave me just now. My question was very simple. First, after this new academic building is completed, I want to know whether more students will be accommodated. My understanding is that you will be able to increase the number of places, but at least after this new academic building is completed, can you tell me how many more students would be allowed to study in the building? If you are not able to answer me now, at least at the Finance Committee, you should give me some information. How many more students will be accommodated? There should at least be an estimate to cope with future development of the Faculty of Medicine. You should tell us at least how many more students you can take up. For the teaching clinic, the same question applies. I'm surprised that you don't have any information at hand, even at this stage, to tell us in the future how many more patients you can take up. You can tell us how many more, or even how many fewer. You can at least have the figures ready. Can you promise us that next time when the paper is submitted to the Finance Committee, you can tell us clearly these 2 points? Professor Chan. Member asked about these 2 figures. We can supplement the information later. Right, do so after the meeting.
So it's about the number of places and also the number of patients. So there is no reason why we should object to this item. But then if you're not able to provide us with the figures that we asked for, so we can make our own assessment, then it would be kind of hard for us to just give you our approval. That's all. Next, Eddie Chu, 3 minutes, second round. Thank you, Chairman. On the design of the project, I have 2 points to make. First, at Pak Fu Lam Road right now, to the southeastern side of the building, there is an elongated bus stop. But then looking at the design right now, on the southeastern side of the building, there is no entrance. In other words, if the students want to go to the bus stop, then they will have to come out from the northern part of the building, and then they'll have to walk on Pak Fu Lam Road before they can reach the bus stop. So on the southeastern part of the building, can you have an access or have an entrance? Second, with regard to SIL, the western section, there will be a QMH station. So if you look at the design of the block, so have you already reserved a certain space for the development of the SIL in the future, Professor Lim? On the bus stop, right next to it, there is a triangular site which doesn't come under the site. The LCSD has a triangular site in between the bus stop and the building, and therefore concerning accessibility from the bus stop to the building along Pak Fu Lam Road, actually from the existing footbridge right beneath it, we have a Pak Fu Lam entrance, so students will be able to make use of the learning commons on the first floor, and then they'll be able to have access to Pak Fu Lam Road. That would also provide direct access from Pak Fu Lam Road to the building. But then, as you might have noticed, along Sassoon Road, you see that the width of Sassoon Road will also be widened, and there are also escalators to help them gain access to Pak Fu Lam Road. So all these will help improve the accessibility between Pak Fu Lam Road and Sassoon Road. So I hope I've already addressed the concern of the lawmaker. So when you talk about the entrance, when I look at the layout plan, enclosure 1, the first drawing, so you have a Pak Fu Lam Road entrance. So did you refer to this just now? Well, enclosure 1, sheet 2 of 2 will show you an access to the footbridge. In fact, there is another link at grade to Pak Fu Lam Road. So there is an at grade link. So that's the triangular open space of LCSD. So is it to the north of it? Yes, to the north. But then there is a sitting out area. Will that provide an even more direct access? Because for the site of the LCSD, that's in between our block and Pak Fu Lam Road, that's why we do not have the right to cross over it. And our people would also not be going to the eastern part of the building. So for the main users or the students, they would mainly be making use of the entrance between Sassoon Road and Pak Fu Lam Road. But of course, it's for the administration to consider. So they may have to pass through the sitting out area of LCSD, but then it's actually at a level that is somewhat lower than Pak Fu Lam Road. So it's not really very convenient. That's why we will be focusing on the first floor of the footbridge, and also right beneath the footbridge that might provide direct access to Pak Fu Lam Road, and that would mean significant improvement in terms of the users. But can the Development Bureau approach the LCSD whether or not we can have an additional entrance for the block? As Professor Lim said, even if the LCSD permits them to use it, it's not very practicable because there is an altitude difference or a level difference between the sitting out area and Pak Fu Lam Road. So after the meeting, Professor Lim can also take it up with the LCSD to find out if it's feasible. But I'm sure Professor Lim has already considered it. Actually, in his response, he has already said that they already looked into that. All right? Yes, Mr. Chang. All right. During the past few years, the medical faculty might have adjusted its curriculum, and more emphasis is now put on teaching students to have broader horizons so that they would not just be focusing on medicine, and then by their 3rd or 4th year, there will also be other subjects that they will have to study. So with the new teaching block, what has it got to do with the change in the curriculum? Can you tell us more specifically as to the design of the building and also how it's going to be related to the curriculum? Because I'm referring to the students' learning space, because on one of the plans it has been shown, but it's not very clear. That is with regard to the new curriculum design and the new teaching block. How would they work together to achieve the objective? That's point number one. And number two, ultimately, well, I'm not familiar with medicine, but I would emphasize that as a medical student, in terms of their learning space, is there anything that the new teaching block can offer to them when compared to the old building blocks or building facilities? From the perspective of the students, will the design of the building be able to bring them something new in terms of teaching and also scientific research? So 1.5 minutes. Please be precise and concise in your response. Thank you. First, I'd like to clarify that with the new teaching block, so we are not referring to the undergraduate students. So mainly, we're talking about the TCM students and also the postgraduates. And also, as Mr. Tam explained just now, well, in terms of the nursing students, they would need special rooms so that they can learn the skills that would be applied by nurses in the hospitals. So we do have the labs right now, but then they are not enough. That's why in a new teaching block, there will be 2 stories to expand such facilities so that they can learn or acquire such skills. And Mr. Chang also asked about the curriculum. Well, at present, other than their main study, students would also have opportunities to go to the main campus to take courses. So that's the current arrangement. Okay, no further follow-up? No. Next, Dr. Kwok asking for the 4th time, 1 minute. Yes, let me stress again that with so many vertical greening, and yet the old trees are going to be felled, I think is hypocritical, and that's not acceptable. I hope that you can come up with more details next time. And also, you're talking about some 40,000 square meters shortfall, and this building will only be able to provide an additional 10,000 square meters NOVA. But then if you look at raising funds or donations, is kind of difficult. Even for the centennial building, the donation has been quite active. So is it that because the medical faculty has become Shing School of Medicine, so it's hard to raise funds or donations elsewhere? Because all the donations will have to come under this name, Shing. So do you have any long-term solution to this? You're still short of some 30,000 square meters NOVA. So how are you going to make up for that shortfall? This is not directly related to this project, but then can the university respond to the question raised by Dr. Kwok? So Dr. Hong, Dr. Cannon.
We're developing a 10-year capital plan, which will show what our capital requirements are over the next 10 years. That will map onto our academic projections over that time, where we want to go academically, and then underpinning that will be a financial plan which will actually fund that. And that financial plan will be a mixture of government funding, of sponsorship, of donors, and of income that we're able to generate ourselves. So this forms part of a 10-year plan, which includes academic buildings, student residences, and a whole range of facilities. And this is a key part of that plan.
All
right, time's up. Can I ask for further questions later? Please be brief and precise, all right? If no one else would like to ask question.
University found difficulty in finding donors because of the saga coming from the naming of the medical faculty. I noticed that there wasn't any difficulty even in the centennial campus in raising funds from other donors, but in these particular buildings or the project that I can emphasize, I didn't find any other donors which is willing to donate money to have buildings like that? Is it the situation faced by the university?
Well, I mean, this is a very early stage in this part of the project. We haven't sought donors for capital expansion in Sassoon Road or for the medical faculty because we haven't been expanding down there. We are now. We're putting extension onto what's the William Mock building at the moment. This is a new building, and again, we're very confident that we will find people willing to come forward and sponsor these buildings. So we're not unduly concerned about that. We haven't been looking terribly hard in the past because we haven't needed to. This is us beginning to start that process.
Chairman, I don't think he has answered my question. I think I'll ask again. Well, you have 1 additional minute because no one else is asking question. I'd like to ask this. Well, Professor Chen, you might like to help him out because I've noticed that for this particular building, there are no other donors who are willing to chip in. So my question is, if there are fewer donors, that might affect the university's expansion program or update their facilities, then is it because of the naming some years ago, and as a result of that, other donors are not willing to donate under the name of Shing School of Medicine? Because even if you donate further funds, you're only glossing the lily for Shing. Is that right? I think Dr. Cannon has already answered the question. As far as the university is concerned, they have no plans to do that. Well, you're speaking on behalf of the Hong Kong U. Well, I'm a graduate of Hong Kong U. I'm just speaking on the facts because from what I've heard from Dr. Cannon, if you have anything that you're not clear about, I think I was just clarifying on their behalf. But then if you'd like to put it to Professor Chen, I can defer to Professor Chen. Thank you, Chairman. As Dr. Cannon has already explained, well, we haven't really started to seek donors to make donations for the new building. There is no question of naming the building yet. Well, for a long period of time on Sassoon Road, no building has been put up. And in the foreseeable future, this is going to be the only building that we're going to build. That's why we haven't got the experience. We haven't really tried to seek donors to name a building. But then for this particular building, have you sought any donors? Why not? Yes, Professor Chen. Dr. Kwok, in fact, we haven't really got the approval from this council. That's why we have not started to do that. In other words, you have to get the funds from the administration before you seek donors, right? Professor Chen? Yes, because only when we have the promise from the administration will it be easy for us to identify donors. All right. If there are no further questions, then I'll put it to the vote. Will those in favor please raise their hands? All right. All in favor? Okay, so this item is approved. Yes? Dr. Kwok? I'd like to claim a division. I'd like to single this out for separate voting at the FC. Okay, so it will be singled out for separate voting at the FC meeting. And for the representatives who are here, I'd like to invite you to provide additional information at the FC meeting. Okay? Thank you. Next item, can we invite the team for the next item to join us? Okay, so let's take a break of 2 minutes.